Hello, I'm Vybarr Cregan-Reid. I'm a reader in English and Environmental Humanities here at the University of Kent, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the 5+1 reasons that you should probably go for a run today. If I had the time, I could probably talk to you about 300 to 500 reasons, but we're going to talk in very, very broad terms. And then I'm going to finish off by giving you an extra reason. So we've got 5 scientific reasons and then 1 sort of humanities-based reason from Parisian thinkers. So I want to start by asking you to imagine a Venn diagram. On the Venn diagram is going to be 5 big sections, and the first of these is each of the sections is going to be about the different benefits that you garner from recreational activities. So the first one is the physiological benefits, the benefits that your sport or activity would actually have on your body. And these are really, really obvious ones. They're things like general fitness, strength, respiratory health, and improved bone density. And all different activities would have different physiological benefits or impacts. The second section in our very complicated Venn diagram is psychological benefits, the psychological benefits. Now, there are hundreds and hundreds of these, but to give you some sense of what they might be, one might be, does the sport actually enhance your intelligence? Does the sport actually make you more intelligent? There's a process called hippocampal neurogenesis, which is a process that happens deep in the hippocampus where new stem cells get created and are basically just sitting there waiting to be given something to do. They're ready for new information to be taken in. So some exercises will actually have this effect on the brain. And improved resilience would be another psychological benefit, higher self-esteem, or indeed an improved body image. So you might feel, or you might worry a bit less about how you look. So that would be some of those psychological benefits. Our next section, the next reason that you should go for a run today is because of the neurological benefits that it would give you, such as improved proprioception. Proprioception is a sixth sense that we all have. David Beckham's abilities of proprioception are absolutely fantastic, but basically proprioception is your ability to understand where your limbs are in space. So if you close your eyes and put your fingers on your nose, you should have no problem doing this, but it would be much more difficult to put your finger on someone else's nose. This is because we know where our bodies are in space. So improved proprioception, boosted motor skills, and also better trained senses. Certain recreational activities will improve your abilities to be able to read, understand, and compute the environment around you. So those are some of the neurological benefits. Then there are immunological benefits, benefits that make you, activities that make you less susceptible to disease, especially the really, really big killers like cancer, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. But also certain activities will increase the number of white blood cells you have, or the natural killer cells that actually attack some cancers. So different kinds of activities will have a different impact on your immune system. And then finally, and this is a really, really huge issue, is the environmental benefits or the environmental impact of the activity that you're doing. So one of the aspects of this would be, what sort of footprint does your activity require? Does it require the use of a huge stadium, which is left empty for most of the week, but only used at the weekends? Or does your activity require that you go to a park being an open, free space that everyone is able to use and everyone has equal access to? But there are other sorts of environmental benefits as well. It's not only about what spaces get used, but about what the environments actually do for us, for our bodies, and for our psychological well-being. There's a newish branch of psychology called environmental psychology, which specifically looks at the amazing impact that natural environments and green spaces can have on our well-being. So these would be the 5 sections of our diagram: physiological benefits, psychological benefits, neurological benefits, immunological benefits, and environmental benefits. And in this diagram, sports and recreational activities would dot themselves all over the place. Some would appear only in one circle, but most would cross over between more than one, between several. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about, one extremely popular recreational activity at the moment is gaming. So to give you some idea of how gaming would score in these 5 sections, so it would score maybe 5 out of 10 for neurological benefits because it's very, very good at hand-eye coordination, really, really good at training and testing hand-eye coordination. But it's not so good because that's pretty much motor skills is pretty much the only thing that it works on, and it's a very specific kind of motor skills. Also, it can cause RSI, so in terms of neurology, it's not absolutely fantastic. It's absolutely hopeless for mental restoration. So our abilities to concentrate, psychologists call directed attention. And just like your life in Call of Duty that diminishes while you're being machine gunned by enemies, our abilities to concentrate also diminish at a similar rate to the point where we become completely mentally exhausted. And all we can do is rest or sleep to restore our directed attention. So gaming is an intensely draining activity, so it's not very good for mental restoration. It would also score a 0 for physiological benefits because it is actually bad for your body. I talked about RSI, which is, of course, neurological, but it's also a physiological disease. And the fact that you sit hunched in one position for several hours on end is just terrible for your body, absolutely terrible for your body. Even more so given the fact that most of us now sit down in offices for an entire day and then go home and sit down and game on our days off. So in terms of physiology, it's really, really poor. So in our Venn diagram, gaming wouldn't appear in the physiological benefits section at all. It's poor to okay for in terms of environmental benefits. It has quite a small footprint. It requires some power whilst it's being used. The console requires some power while it's being used, which isn't bad, but it's not terrible. It also doesn't require loads and loads of space to be taken up so that the activity can actually happen. So it's not bad. But it's not brilliant either. The very fact that we need a console at all in order to do the activity and the fact that a console needs to be upgraded every few years, again, is not absolutely wonderful. So it's poor to okay for the environment. And it scores a 0 for immunological benefits for the simple reason that your immune system is not tested in any way whilst you're playing the game. Your immune system isn't challenged, so it's not going to make you any better at fending off a cold or a cancer or type 2 diabetes or heart disease. So gaming is like the chocolate bar of exercise. It's really nice, really enjoyable. The calories are not empty because you derive a great deal of enjoyment from it, but it's not fantastic for you either. So another really, really popular exercise at the moment, cycling. Now we'd think cycling would just be perfect in all aspects of these benefits that you would garner from this kind of physical activity. So it's really great for immunological and environmental impact in terms of the immune system because it's an intense cardiovascular workout. The immune system also gets a workout as well. Physiologically, it improves things like respiration, circulation, increases strength, and it certainly enhances motor skills because so much of the activity happens while balancing on 2 wheels. But it's only moderately good for levels of environmental immersion. So I talked earlier about environmental psychology and how it's really, really important that we immerse ourselves in natural environments. But there's all different levels of immersion. A very shallow level of immersion in a natural environment would be looking at a photograph of a natural place. But a much more potent way to immerse yourself in a natural environment is to actually engage with it, to climb a tree or to do some gardening. So the levels of immersion in those activities would be much, much greater, and the beneficial psychological effects that you'd get from the environment would be much more potent as well. Cycling, you tend to whiz along through an environment which is very, very good. Psychologically, it's very, very good, don't get me wrong, but you don't actually engage with the environment because your feet never actually touch the ground. And a surprising thing about cycling is that it can actually diminish bone health. Professional cyclists, long-term cyclists, have to be aware of the fact that they're opening themselves up to the risk of osteoporosis in older age because it's not a weight-bearing exercise. It means that bone density, particularly below the waist, can actually decrease in cyclists. So it's not brilliant for bone health. So cycling, in general, is very, very good. It's very, very good, but it's not a perfect exercise. So I could go on, I could compare football and gardening and golf and tennis and archery and swimming and even tiddlywinks. But I want you to imagine that there's a tiny sweet spot right in the centre of our imaginary Venn diagram. And it's a spot where all of the circles combine and cross over into one another, and it's an activity that has almost no environmental footprint, and like gardening, it might actually be good for the environment. It's excellent for muscular, respiratory, circulatory and bone health. And if the 1970s Kung Fu icon Bruce Lee is to be believed, it's the king of all exercises. So the exercise I'm talking about is, of course, running. So this is a terrible Venn diagram. It's absurdly simplified because the one that I'd actually like to do is too complicated to exist. But so cycling is pretty near the centre there because it's very, very, very beneficial, but it's not perfect. But running actually is beneficial for all of these things. So the fact that running sits so centrally amongst the long list of benefits that recreation and exercise provides is an indication of how central it is to our identity. Just as fish swim and apes climb and birds fly, Homo sapiens run. And millions of years of evolution have increasingly selected our bodies and bones and brains to be rewarded for running in many, many, many ways. So these are the 5 reasons that you should probably go for a run today, because it provides more benefits to the body, the brain and the environment than any other sport or recreational activity. But there are hundreds more that don't fit so easily into a scientific or into a randomised trial, or might not be able to find its own individual cell on a spreadsheet. So many indeed that I filled a book with them. Filled a book with all of the benefits that running gives us. And what I'm going to do with the rest of this talk is talk through an additional one that can't be so easily measured by science, and it's to do with the politics of Parisian thought. Over the centuries, many philosophers have worried about the subtle and invasive ways of modern life, and especially in the ways that it can trick us into believing that all things modern are what come most easily and naturally to us. One band of such thinkers that emerged from the bars and boulevards of Paris in the 1950s and 60s were the psychogeographers. In the year before the famous Paris student riots of 1968, Guy Debord published the Society of the Spectacle. Now that the emptiness of modern life was hidden behind consumer commodities and the craving to attain wealth, he worried that our desire for spectacle has suppressed the fulfillment that we may find in the mundanity of the everyday. The life of the street has gone indoors to live more privately. And when we do take to the streets, we take our privacy with us in shiny cars with secure windows and central locking. And when we walk with our earphones in. We're taking our own mobile private worlds with us. So these young Parisians called themselves the psychogeographers. Among other things, they sought to unpick how easily we become consumer zombies as we amble the streets as obedient consumers, constantly in sleep mode, ready to spy a bargain. Committed to studying the effects of place on the psychology of the individual, the psychogeographers aspired to a kind of civil disobedience in the hope that it might scrape away at the veneer of the everyday. Another Parisian, this time an adopted one, also worried for our consumer culture. He was George Orwell. He was deeply unsettled by it. In his essay, Pleasure Spots, written as the dust was settling on the Second World War. He worried for the future of travel because travel plus consumerism becomes tourism. He saw our aspirant ideal of what tourism and luxury should be, and it was one without nature, which denied the present and it prevented thought. The ideals of pleasure tourism seem to be these: that one is never alone, that one never does anything for oneself, one is never within the sight of wild vegetation or natural objects of any kind, light and temperature are always artificially regulated, and one is never away from the sound of music. So some could argue that this vision of tourism that Orwell was worrying about now might be seen in something like something similar to a Centre Parks, perhaps, or a giant cruise ship. The aspiration to luxury, Orwell believed, was driving us away from the real world, to incubate us in an environment that prevented thought and distracted us from the conditions of life itself. In fact, Orwell said that it was driving us back into the womb. We were so infantilized by it. Just as Orwell worried about the commodification of our leisure experiences, Guy Debord and friends believed that the commodities and the consumerization of everything was insulating us from real life. To break through this disconnection, though, we need to revel in our bodies through yoga, dance, sport, or meditation. The kind of immersive concentration required by running functions as a mental and physical escape from the boredom of the everyday. Our time is too valuable and too short to be contained within our cubicles and workspaces. Doing something like running is real. You stop being a consumer and start to feel the pulse of the city beneath your feet like it's an electric current. To say that movement is political is to rehash what the psychogeographers of the 1960s asserted, but they were correct. Freedom of movement should be an absolute right. And one of the benefits of running is that it makes you feel like you are free. Long before our senses of sight, smell, audition, touch, or taste evolved, it was our ability to respond to space through movement that first developed. It is our very oldest sense. Our ability to link motion to reward predates the very oldest parts of our brain, even our dinosaur brain, the limbic system. And it locates our abilities with those of the very simplest life forms over 1 billion years ago. There's a reason that plants don't have brains. We only have a brain because we move. And when we don't move, our body is not rewarded. So we do not have a body in the same way that we have a place to live or a bank account. The philosopher Martin Heidegger said, we do not have a body, rather we are bodily. We are somebody who is alive. At work, manacled to emails, fettered to filing cabinets, there is nothing to lose but your temper, your will, or your marbles. To run is to run against all of these things. Do so, and you have nothing to lose but your chains, as Karl Marx put it. You have nothing to lose but your boredom, said Parisian situationist Raoul van Eygen. Run, and you have nothing to lose but oblivion, regret, and perhaps a little weight. Thank you.